welcome to the StudioPTBO podcast. We are back, and we are back with another amazing guest. Like I said to Neil, this has been quite the opportunity to have so many amazing guests this year, and have the opportunity to just get so much wisdom from different people across Ontario. So it's been a great. We're here with Richard Peddie.
Nice to be here in my very noisy house with construction going next door.
Yeah. Didn't it start just when we started to take the podcast?
Right. Yeah, but, it was quiet. It was quiet there for a second.
It'll probably get worse. We'll talk loud.
That's okay. We'll talk loud. Richard, we're really happy you've agreed to do this with us today. Richard, for those that don't know, is an entrepreneur, an environmentalist, a mentor, an author. He has so many things he's done in his career, a wonderful career. And it all started in Windsor, Ontario. And Richard went to the University of Windsor, studied business. Walk us through, you had goals from the get-go, didn't you, when you went to Windsor, that you had big, lofty goals. You were ambitious.
Well, I love basketball. I even prior to going to the University of Windsor, I followed the university team, and they were very successful, winning multiple championships. The Pistons were across the border in Detroit. The University of Michigan was there, getting beat by UCLA every year, it seemed. And I love basketball. I practiced constantly. Couldn't make the high school team. Definitely couldn't make the university team. Absolutely no chance of ever playing in the NBA. And when I was 20, I wrote in a journal that I wanted to run a basketball team someday.
That's amazing.
And that's what I did. That I had that in my mind for the next 29 years, and 29 years later, I was president of the Raptors.
That's beautiful.
It's kind of like your first vision, almost like your vision for where you wanted to go in the future.
You know, if you've read my books, I'm a great believer. Whether it be an individual or an organization, they should have a vision, a dream, if you like.
Absolutely.
And now, I'm not thinking I was the leader of the best leader of the world. This was 1967 or so. And in fact, I can't even remember what year it was, but it just so happened that I had a journal and I wrote it down. Later on, a lot has been written about vision and values, and it's been proven that if you have a vision, you got a chance of it happening. And if you write it down, you have an even bigger chance of it happening. I did not know it at the time. It just was kind of something that came to me and something that played out for me.
It's beautiful, and you were willing to play the long game. You knew it wasn't going to happen overnight.
Well, I can't say that it was front of mind every day. I mean, someone says, have a dream, write it down, and do something every day that brings it forward. And I think that was the author of Chicken Soup for the Soul who said that. And so, I went and got a great job at Colgate. Spent 19 years in consumer products, and I'm learning all this stuff that it takes to run almost any company, frankly: marketing, market research, finance, sales, leadership. And I do remember one of my last years at Pillsbury. I had a spectacular team there, and we had a great fiscal year. We're all sitting around a restaurant, and the team was really good. And I knew that we were an international company. A couple of the guys would be moving on to international jobs with the company, and I said, "So, what do you guys want to do?" And they kind of went around the table, a table not dissimilar to this, in a restaurant on Yonge Street. And then he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to bring the basketball to Toronto." So that was 1988. And then shortly after that, a year later, the Skydome job came up. And I was smart enough, even though I did not know pro sports, it was pretty obvious that if you wanted to run a sports team, you have to know about the venue that the sports team's operating in, because it's such a large source of revenue. And so the Skydome job came up, and I applied for it. I can remember the headhunter saying, why should we consider you? I mean, you know nothing about this. And I said, yeah, I really don't know anything about this, but I know all about the things that I learned in consumer products. This is 1989, and frankly, the leagues were not very sophisticated.
Okay.
And I said, I think a lot of this stuff I've learned running Pillsbury, Colgate, General Foods can apply to sports.
Interesting.
And they bought that story. And I joined, and I must admit that I got there, and I did not know a damn thing about putting on events, and the building still had to be finished. It was largely built, but had all kinds of deficiencies. And it was a heck of a one-year learning curve. But
and the necessity for this, the Sky Dome, was out of the Rain Bowl or freezing Rain Bowl of 1982,
That's
right?
right, yeah,
I was
yeah.
at that game with my dad.
Yeah.
And I remember that it was brutal. I don't think we were in the stadium. We were watching barely any of the game, Richard.
Yeah.
And after that, there was sort of an uproar around
Paul,
Toronto. It
Paul
really
Godfrey
galvanized.
led it,
Yeah.
and they built something that was supposed to be $380 million, and then they added a hotel to it and a bigger video board and a bunch of inefficiencies in construction, and it ended up topping out at $580 million, and pretty much poisoned the well for any teams from getting financial help in the province of Ontario.
Yeah,
Which
totally.
afterwards, after running pro teams for a number of years, I don't think rich owners should get help anyhow, but that's another story.
Yeah. So, boy, were you there at a good time, though, in the heyday of Sky Dome in the sense of the team, the product on the field. So the Blue Jays, you were there 93. They won their first championship.
92, I think, didn't they?
92? Was
yeah.
Joe Carter's home run 92? Yeah.
I can't remember which
yeah,
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're right. We won. We were doing 4 million attendance a year.
Yeah. So it obviously makes it easier from that standpoint when actually the product is really good on the ice,
And
or
it
so
was
to speak, or on the field.
one of the modern wonders of the world. No one had a roof that moved. No one had a hotel looking over
Mm-hmm.
the field. No one had a Hard Rock Cafe. So there was what we called a dome factor, that people showed up. We had no competition in the city. Maple Leaf Gardens was a relic run by Relics.
Yeah.
And so we basically took all their shows as well. So we were doing 30 concerts. Bad acoustics, but we were doing 30 concerts.
Crazy,
You
yeah.
add all it up, we did over, like almost 5 million people a year. It was awesome.
That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about your time at the Sky Dome, because as I was reading your book, I was laughing because you mentioned that you were able to remember, the 125 full-time employees when you're at Sky Dome. And Neil is absolutely awful at remembering names. Anyone that knows Neil, he's just not good with names. So
I admit it. I'm
like,
working on
how
it.
did you remember though? How did you remember all those names?
Well, my brain was a lot younger.
Okay, fair enough.
So I'm right with Neil now. Neil, I'll forget all your names as you walk out the door. It was just 120 people, and
Yeah.
I walked the talk a lot.
Totally.
I was very hands-on. We were not unionized. I swept floors between Disney on Ice shows. I took tickets when the lineups were too long. I used to run all the time. I'd go for about a 5-mile run before events by doing all the outside of the building, up all the ramps around all the concourses, and I'd pick up garbage. So everyone knew me, and it was just easy. And you had to, I think, at Maple Leaf Sports, we had 700. A lot of people thought I knew everyone's name. I did not. But I remember, they joined 3 years ago. They just had a child. They just got promoted. Enough to show that I respected them, that I valued them. And I'll tell you, it was one of the values I really believe in is people make the difference. You have to surround yourself with great people. They're important. You're a team.
Totally.
And so that belief carried me a long way. And knowing names, they appreciate it.
Yeah.
Did you learn that in consumer goods or being president of those companies all those years, Richard, how to build culture? And at what point did you feel like, I've got it, I figured this out, that it's people, it's talent, it's being a good person that really leads to having a great company and being innovative?
We had a really special university class, which I still get together with. So we were very much a team. I went on to Colgate, and they actually put me through a training program, which I objected to because all my friends are going right into, sales and into marketing. And I did sales, and then I did market research, and then I did industrial engineering. And what I'm doing is, especially industrial engineering, I'm put out into a unionized force that really didn't like the marketing people because we were changing labels and doing all kinds of stuff that made the lines inefficient, and we were marketing weenies is what they called us. And so, but I learned that, and so I took that to General Foods, and I marketing people aren't really comfortable making sales calls to the big chains.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And I was comfortable for some reason. And then when I went to became the president of Hostess, I was on the road 1 or 2 days a week, but also I was in the plants. I can remember driving tractors, just the potato farming. So I did all of that, and then I did the same thing at. So then I moved on to Pillsbury. Same things. Worked in all the plants. Did all of that stuff. And also, I'd read a lot. I read a real pivotal book for me was In Search of Excellence by Peters and Waterman. And so I've learned some good stuff at Colgate. I learned some good stuff at General Foods. I also learned what not to do at General Foods. There was a lot of stuff they weren't doing right, especially people leadership. And then I got moved to Pillsbury, and there was that aha moment saying, I think I figured this out. And I can remember saying to my wife, saying, they're letting me do what I want. Man, it's going to be really interesting if this works.
So cool.
And it did work.
Yeah.
And so right there, then and there, I developed a leadership formula that I've modified. You have to, because you can't stand still in anything. But I had the basis that worked.
Tell us the story about Pillsbury Pizza Pops. This is a pretty cool story. I like it. My daughters grew up eating that. It's really like a signature staple, huge brand name in Canada. It never made it to the U.S. I don't know why they didn't pick it up. But tell us how you acquired that.
Well, again, I like to go into stores, and I remember I was in Winnipeg, and I'm walking around. I'm constantly looking for ideas. I think it's best practices. What's Quaker doing? What's Procter & Gamble doing? What's anyone doing that maybe I can use?
Makes sense, yeah.
And I went over and looked for the grocery manager and said, hey, I'm the president of Pillsbury, which is kind of cool for them that a president shows up in their store. And I said, so what's good here? What is really happening here?
Really, you just walked in and just kind of.
And that's why I asked him.
Awesome.
I'm looking for ideas. So ask a question, right? And
Yeah.
he said, oh, come on over to the frozen food aisle. You should see this thing here. It's built. It's in Winnipeg. It's owned by two guys from Winnipeg, a little plant, and it's outselling frozen orange juice. So I went back, pulled an AC Nielsen report on it.
Yeah.
And holy cow, this thing's really going. And so we called on them, and I wooed them and wooed them and wooed them, and finally they said no. And I remembered it was a rainy Wednesday or Thursday night. Pillsbury office is up at the top of Don Valley. I'm driving a Porsche in those days, and so one of the guys said, I'll take you back downtown. They're saying no. So on the way downtown, I said, it's really too bad we can't do a deal, because now I'm going to knock off your product and we're going to launch it, and we weren't going to do that, and we're going to knock it off.
I love it.
And we're this big company, and I really hate to do it to you guys. Yeah. And they sold the company to me, and it was a huge success. We rebranded it to Pillsbury, and you're right. I negotiated the rights for the United States as well, and they chose in their wisdom not to do it.
Oh, I think it would have been hit there as well. But
it's kind of a gut bomb. It's great. Teenagers come home, pop it in the microwave.
Super easy.
I still eat it occasionally, and listen, I still marvel at the facings it has, because I still love grocery stores.
Yeah.
Like, you had a ton of influence over multiple organizations, and you did a lot, in your career. I guess, what advice would you have to a young leader who is just getting into a position for the first time, that is really, they might be walking into a bad position? How quickly would you recommend making changes within the organization? And if so, why?
So the changes meaning you make the change?
Yeah, or? You as the CEO. So if you're a brand new CEO walking into a brand new position,
you inherit this company and this culture.
Well, so my first one was Hostess, and it was in good shape.
Yeah.
So I followed. How old was I? 35 years old, and so I inherited it. The fellow who had been president was now the president of General Foods, who is my boss. And basically, I tinkered with it. There was stuff my learning curve was huge.
Yeah.
I didn't stay that long because I wanted to be a CEO. General Foods wasn't my future. I knew I had to get out of there. The culture was not right for me. I mean, it had been great. I had 12 years. I got promoted to vice president at 29 and president at 35. They were decent to me, but I knew I wasn't their type of guy. Yeah. And there's been a number of my peers that were real stars that made that same conclusion. So that was kind of a tinkering thing. But between what I learned at Colgate, what I learned at General Foods, what I was learning at Hostess, then I went into Pillsbury with a plan. I can remember giving a speech probably about 3 weeks into the job to all the staff saying, this is my game plan. This is what we're going to do. And I pulled that speech out about 2 years later. It's amazing how much of it happened.
Was it your vision, really, and values?
Yeah, it was.
That was.
So again, Peters and Waterman were the ones who really championed vision and values in about 1983. And I read the book as I was considering going to Pillsbury. I said, man, this stuff works. I want to try this. And when I got to Pillsbury, because the book was a bestseller and lots of people copied the ideas, sure enough, Pillsbury had launched a vision and values. You know, be the best food company, quality is essential, people make the difference, excellence is a way of life. Those were their 3 values.
Yeah.
I looked at it and said, yeah, we can work with that. And so it was very much based on that. So we were asleep at the switch. We had excuse me, no new products. I took my aggressive sales approach out on the road. Really worked on the people side of things, customer service, and it worked. And
what did the aggressive sales look like back in the day? Like, you know, right now we have things like social media that allow us to kind of be more aggressive online, build a relationship with people. Like, what does sales look like back at that time?
Well, I'm really talking the sales to the chains, the
to
Loblaws,
the chains. So the B2B stuff. Okay.
And even then, most consumer products presidents did not go out on the road.
Okay.
John Cassidy was one who went and had a wonderful career at Chorus Entertainment afterwards. Jack Scott. There was your dad. Yeah. There wasn't a lot of us who did that. I don't know why. I think they were afraid of doing it.
Okay.
And so the very fact that I was out doing that, and I was at retail all the time.
Okay.
So I knew what was going on. I took also a different approach. When I'd go on a sales call with a General Foods salesperson, they went right to the numbers. This is how much money you made last year. I goes, oh no, don't lead with that, because they want more money every year. A greater percentage of sales goes to trade spending. I said, we're going to give them ideas. So at Pillsbury, it was, you know, popping fresh ideas, grow with the giant. We had a theme every year, and I would go from Stellarton with Sobeys to Victoria, BC, and I'd pitch probably 12, 14 of these to presidents. Wow. And we go through what we're all about, our values, here's what we're doing, and leave them all kinds of ideas to grow the business. And then at the end, I'd talk about numbers. And sure enough, after a couple of years of this, my trade spending as a percentage dropped, and our share market went up, our profitability went up, and that's pretty rare in everyone's trade spending was going up, and they were cutting their advertising. So that worked. I'm not sure it would work today because, in fact, I really believe when I talked to your dad and other peers, it was the glory days. Yes, we had Loblaws. They were really aggressive, but we did not have Amazon, and we did not have the big superstores and the Walmarts. I don't know even if my strategy, if I could get in to see the president of Walmart, but I could get in and see John Leder, the president of Loblaws. So I think it's changed.
You're around at the right moment in time, sort of. And Richard's referring to my dad, David Morton, great guy who was the president and CEO of Quaker Oats for many years. Richard and my dad were really good friends and
competitors.
And competitors
I had
too.
Post cereals, he had Quaker.
Yeah, but
we could not talk without a lawyer with us.
But collaborators too, and good friends now. Richard, tell us about the whiteboard, what that means to you, and when you latched on to that. And the whiteboard, really, for people who don't know, is really where you put your vision and your values and your milestones and your benchmarks and your goals. And when did you implement that? At what stage of your career? And you first locked onto it when you saw Dave Nichols had it?
That's right. You guys have read. So I'm pitching Dave Nichol. I never could sell him anything because he had this concept. He didn't want us to make any money. So, but he was a brilliant guy. And I walked into his office. His whole wall was a big whiteboard. And a whiteboard's an erasable board. You're supposed to write on it with the right markers that don't leave it stained forever. And he was writing all over his board. We're trying to design a pizza. And I came back and said to my office guy, I said, I want a whiteboard. And so then, boy, I used it. I had whiteboards right through to my Maple Leaf Sports. I had a boardroom, very informal boardroom next to my office, a big whiteboard on it. And I would write, when I'm meeting with my VPs, whoever, I would write out my thoughts on it. In a certain color of ink, and then there'd be all kinds of other ink colors out there, and I'd say, well, you guys write on it, and you could see this thing evolving on the whiteboard. So it was a great before I ever did a big presentation, I would map it out on a whiteboard, and now I have a whiteboard. I have a digital whiteboard upstairs.
Oh, do you? Oh, that's cool.
That you can, I can write on it. It goes right to my thing.
It's made a huge difference to our company, hasn't it? The whiteboard. We implemented it about 3 months ago.
Yeah, and reading your books was so cool because it reinforced a lot of what we were doing as a company. And a lot of what I did in my corporate background. It was just like really reinforced a lot of different things in regards to how important research is, how important vision, values, goals, like setting all of these things make all the difference when you're a leader. It's super interesting. Yeah. It's so it's simple.
It is simple,
but
a lot of people don't follow it.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
Well, and sticking to it too.
Yeah, totally.
First of all, you got to do it.
Repetition.
Spend time on it. Yeah. Repetition. Yeah. Just stick to it. It's you just really have to stick to it.
Yeah.
Richard, 14 years president and CEO of Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment. That's an incredible run, and it's to me all the more incredible because the product wasn't necessarily always the best on the ice. That's hard. So you, from a business standpoint, you're absolutely crushing it year in and year out. Where you would take flack occasionally was they would blame you for the product.
More than occasionally.
Yeah, more than occasionally. I'm being diplomatic here.
When somebody gets death, death threats, I would say more than occasion.
So Richard used to sit right in the stands at Raptors games. I would see him there. My dad and I had floor seats for a couple of years, and I'd be like, "What's Richard doing up there, Dad?" But you'd be right in with the crowd. And what is that like to run a highly successful company like that, but see the product not doing that well? Like, how does it affect you personally and mentally? It became draining for you.
Well, our vision was to win, but win on and off the ice, on and off the playing field. And so off the playing field, we're kicking ass. I mean, just by every score, where our profitability, our profit margins, our best practices, our new products, everything is working really, really well. But off the ice, we did not get the job done. And I take, I blame myself, the general managers, the coaches, the owners, not the players. We did not get the job done. We had a good run for 4 or 5 years with the Leafs, but not so good at the end. The Raptors were kind of like a donut. We had a good run in there with Brian Colangelo. Yeah. We had a bit of a good run with Vince Carter. It's tough, and that's what the fans care about. They don't even care if you make money. They really don't care at all, and I guess they shouldn't care, other than if the team does really badly, the franchise can move. Yeah. That was never the issue with us, but that's an issue in the Buffaloes and Pittsburghs in the past.
And the hot dogs taste worse when the team's losing, right,
Absolutely,
Richard?
It does.
The food was always great until then. But you were part of the hiring for people like Brian Burke, John Ferguson on the Raptors, Brian Colangelo, Babcock, when you hired him to be the general manager, and he made the trade for Vince Carter. But it often, you were the one at the top, and it often came back to you. What is it draining as a leader at times like that? You go from consumer goods where your products were all selling well, General Mills, Hostess, all those places, to a place like the Raptors where it's everything. It's not only that you have to crush it, but you have to win, on the field too. Was that draining for you as a leader, or do you just have to have thick skin and persevere?
Well, you do. I would say presidents bleed too, but you do have to get a thicker skin. And I get so many young people that want to work in the industry, so many. And we talk about how tough it is, but I don't tell them not to try, because they should have a dream. I mean, whoever thought I'd run a basketball team? So I'm not going to tell anyone not to have that dream. But I do say, if you can't take the heat from the media and the fans, you do not want to be in this business. Yeah. So it's people used to say that we made so much money we didn't care about winning. I goes, no. Winning is good business. Winning championships is great business. Yeah. So, and also you've got to understand, our vocation was to grow the business. Our avocation is, you didn't have to be a Leaf, Raptors, Toronto FC big fan to work for us, but you were, or you might have been a huge Leaf fan forever, or a recent Raptors fan. So when we lost, we knew that we'd get calls about the hot dogs the next day. We'd get calls from the season seat holders the next day. So we're taking the heat on the business side. And frankly, the hot dogs per caps aren't as good. Yeah. People, am I going to renew my suite? The team's not doing well. So we really feel it on the business side, but we're fans too. So we were crushed when we'd lose those games, just like fans. So I used to say, listen, the 700 people and 2,000 part-time people felt worse than the fans because we got
100%.
it hit twice.
Yeah. I'm still convinced if Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady had stayed together, we would have won a championship. But anyway,
it's possible.
Yeah.
But Tracy, you know,
Tracy wanted out
he
from the
so
get-go.
badly wanted to go to Florida right from the start.
What can you do?
Vince, you know, Vince is 41 years old now. The dean of basketball. He's wise. He wasn't so wise then. But listen, we screwed up things too with Vince. So. Yeah, shared problem.
And Richard wrote this great book, which I highly recommend. It came out in 2013, awesome. Dream Job. It was a bestseller, and it really takes you inside the bowels, so to speak, of his time running MLSE, and that's TFC. That's Marlies too.
Yep.
That's Maple Leafs, Raptors. Really fascinating read. Highly recommended, as well as this one. I want to touch on something that you touched on, I believe, in this other book you wrote that came out in 2015, Contrarian Thinking. So Cody and I are big fans of what we call reverse engineering approaches to life and not following always best practices, but following them when they work, absolutely. What to you, Richard, does contrarian thinking look like? And you grew to really, embrace it over time, right? And listen and sometimes execute on that. Right?
Well, two things. If all of us think alike, then some of us are redundant. And I can't remember the woman who was the first African-American president of an Ivy League school, and her name escapes me right now, said we all go stronger in encounters with opposing views. So it's good to listen to that. It's good to get challenged.
Totally.
And I'll tell you, presidents can be the worst. They just think they know the answer to everything. And listen, there were lots of times I really tried to encourage it with my vice presidents and stuff. And so I'd listen. And, in my book is one of my dear, still good friends, Robin Bruner was my executive vice president, general counsel. I once asked her, why do you have the courage to push back on me? She says, because I know you'll listen to me. And, and I used to joke that, Robin, I'd listen. She really stuck to it. She'd be after me for about an hour, and I'd finally say, Robin, get out of my office. But we had that kind of a respect for each other. I would listen to her. And I just think you're missing lots of opportunities. And listen, people won't stay. If the boss is making all the decisions, the really good people or even the average people are going to say, you know what, I'm going to go someplace else. So I think it's key for ideas. It's key for loyalty. It's key for productivity, and you're just crazy not to listen to it.
And what did autonomy look like back then? Like, when you were running these large corporations, you have a lot of managers, you have a lot of, senior executives. Like, what did autonomy look like from a marketing perspective? Because you had a marketing background. So how, did you ever find it difficult to kind of give, the reins to your marketing director at the time to say run free and do what you want to do?
I used to say I go where the opportunities are, where the problems are. We had a wonderful, Peddie and Tarleton, who's now the COO of Ticketmaster, did a wonderful job on the whole live entertainment side.
Yeah.
So I never got involved with any of the artists, any of the 60 concerts. What I did get involved with is meeting with Live Nation and trying to strike a much larger concert business nationally. With the general managers, I wish I had intervened, but I got criticized for Vince Carter trade and all that kind of stuff. And listen, it was a shitty trade, I admit. He had to go, but
it wasn't a great trade. But you didn't make the trade.
Yeah,
you had to sign off on it because you have to trust your general manager.
Yeah,
right?
we got a bag of hammers for him. Yeah. But so they had autonomy, and I had to trust them. And I actually think I should have intervened more. More. I mean, at all on. The Vince Carter trade. I was, when Rob came in with that deal, and I had not been working with Wayne Embry for a long time. Wayne and he had his 82nd or 83rd birthday, I think, yesterday, and we're going to get together when he comes in town in April. We had brought him in, and Wayne and I, now years later, great friends, and he was interim general manager for me for a while, and did some great things. Wayne's kind of rolling his eyes at this, and I'm going, oh man. I goes, but yeah, I'm not supposed to intervene, and I should have said this is shit. I mean, but I would have to fire the guy. Well, I fired him 6 months later anyhow. But
should have just fired him that day.
Yeah, I should have fired him that day.
It's funny because you always say in the books too, you hire slowly and you're very careful about it, but then fire quick.
Yeah.
And Did you learn that from the get-go too early on, or was this after the Babcock trait?
No, I think you know, the president doesn't fire that many people, but there's lots of people that get fired over the course. Like we would have about 8-9% turnover. We tracked it very closely at Pillsbury at Maple Leaf Sports. I really watched. We had identified the top 20% of the company. I did not want to lose them, so I'm running like 1% turnover on them. That's good.
So, and is that your senior executive like that?
No, it could be middle managers. We identified the stars. And we're going to groom the middle managers.
Meritocracy.
Right? Meritocracy, absolutely. But we really measured that and rewarded occasionally. Got bigger bonuses. They got the promotions. They got specialized training and stuff like that. So I also really looked at the bottom. I want to get rid of 4 or 5% of them.
Interesting.
Because we're Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment. We should have the very best people. And so when you talk about firings quickly, you know, we do a written evaluation and they needs improvement, and then the next year they'd still needs improvement, and I'd be saying, come on, we got to make our decision here. So ultimately, you know, the letting go was done by all levels of the company, and typically I would say we did not let go people fast enough, and I was guilty too. Some things that didn't work out, you had to move on.
Yeah, it's funny. Companies get obsessed with retention, don't they, Cody? But it's like sometimes you don't want to retain everyone.
That's right.
I think that's what Richard's saying. It's very honest answer.
Like, you know, it really comes down to values. Like, if they're not living the values, then...
Well, you know, I can't say I let anyone go for, well, maybe 1 or 2 that weren't doing the values thing. But it was really, you know, I had a really talented person in one area. Well, he's still around. He's still a friend. And he was there when I took over the Raptors, and he was very valuable to me. He really knew his basketball. But as we got to be much bigger, and we got into football, and we got into hockey, and we got into broadcast, and we got into condos, he was a specialist, and that job required him or her to be broader. And so that person was moved on. Sometimes the company grows, and the person doesn't grow with it.
And they become friends with you, and you have to part ways, right?
Yeah. Hire strangers and you fire friends.
Yeah.
So
it's awkward. It's hard, but you have to.
It is.
Another thing, gratitude and empathy, I think you're a big fan of, and that comes down to your micro approach to like you sending thank you notes. And you've been a huge fan of that your whole life, and you've done it. Like you send thank you notes to everyone, and you speak about this a lot. A lot of people don't do it, but you preach it. So if the 1% that does do it, you believe win at life, right? Because it
sure helps. I really believe that I started aggressively. I started doing notes a little bit at General Foods and at Hostess, but at Hostess I really started getting into it.
Yeah,
and then it was part of my shtick. Yeah. And I used it to thank people, to recognize they're going through something. I would probably send out 8 a day when I was running Maple Leaf Sports. When I left Pillsbury, and definitely Maple Leaf Sports, I probably wrote 200 exit notes to people. And I always believe that notes have to be specific. It's not great job, better than nothing, but great job, your sales are up 47%. Right. Great job the way you handle it. Make it specific. And then they're very interesting. I developed another term too. And so I taught at the University of Windsor one semester in 2001. And I can remember after the first midterm I gave, a student came to me and was moaning about why he had all these excuses why his mark should be higher. So at lunch, I happened to have lunch with one of my ex-professors, and I told him the story. So what advice can you give me? And he said, you gave him the mark he earned. So I took that expression, you earned it. And when I would write a thank you note, and I also gave out, I tried to be really creative. One thing, I had lots of tickets to give out, concert tickets. but I'd give out, flowers, a bottle of wine. I really tried to mix it up.
Totally.
And people would say, geez, thank you. And I said, you don't have to thank me. You earned it. That was my comeback when someone said thanks.
Thank you.
You earned it.
That is good.
Because I don't give them out easily.
Yeah.
You talk a lot about mindset. And you talk about like in the sense of a good leader needs to be optimistic. what does that look like for you in the positions that you worked in, and how do you think that other CEOs can kind of attach onto an optimistic mindset if they have a sense of pessimism in certain circumstances, like things are just going really poorly, I don't know what to do? How do they turn the optimism on, or can they turn it on?
I'm not sure. I think you're wired a certain way.
Yeah.
I always say, don't worry. It's not, my optimism wasn't rose-colored glasses. Don't worry, be happy, head in the sand optimism.
Yeah.
But listen, when we decided to bring Toronto FC to town, I was optimistic it would work. I had a lot of pushback. The guys on the talk shows, the fellas who'd all failed with soccer teams in Toronto all piled on. Even some of my vice presidents said, "Oh man," because I'd give a vice president, here's what I need from you in this in revenue from whether it's sponsorships or food and beverage, whatever. And we developed a business plan, and I was just really optimistic. So were others, like Paul Byrne was really optimistic, Tom Anselmi, Bob Hunter. They were all really optimistic guys on it, and but not everyone was, and we just pushed on. So, I got into Toronto FC because it checked a lot of boxes. I was completely comfortable. And listen, to this day, I know nothing about football or soccer. But I knew about, in fact, when I stood up in front of the Canadian Soccer Association getting approval to bring a team in, my opening line to them, was, I know nothing about football, but I know a lot about professional sports, and we'll make this a success. And so maybe optimism is also a little naivety, a little arrogance. But I'll tell you, it's a lot better than to be someone who's, I hate the expression when you ask someone, how are they not bad?
Not bad.
Like, what the hell does that mean?
Like head down, face in the sand. Like, it's just the worst way to live your life.
Yeah. So I had one of my closest friends when we were going to school, business school, 100 years ago. He used to, when you ask me, he'd say, excellent. Yeah. And then my class was still very close. Everyone says excellent. Yeah. So Mike says most excellent.
Yeah. He tops them
change it up.
We'll have it. Mike's now got most excellent. We'll leave it at that.
And his instincts on FC were brilliant. I mean, it's an unbelievable euphoric experience going to an FC game, and a lot of what happened just happened on its own there. It wasn't really orchestrated. It was
except for Paul Byrne got out and really understood the clubs, the support groups, and reached out to them. Even like the summer before, we're out on College Street handing out red cards with information about Toronto FC. So he really got to know them. He brought them on. He gave them a section in what's that? The South Zone. Yeah. So we did that. But then you're right.
Just took off.
You roll out the ball. Yeah. There's no one sings. You do a national anthem recorded, so you don't get a problem with singers. And there's no halftime act. There's no mascots. There's no dance pack. It is the game in its purest sense. And Paul and Tom and Selmy understood that. Yeah. And so we did the business side really well. We didn't do so well for a long time on the pitch side.
Yeah, so I know we have to finish up in a couple minutes, but I want to touch on another important part, and that is community, being community-minded. And again, you espouse that in your books. It's not enough just to run a good business and be a good person, have a good culture. It's how you give back to your community, whether it's creating a foundation, being involved in the United Way, being involved in different philanthropic pursuits. What does that mean to you, and why is it important that a good leader do that, give back, or give?
So I got involved in philanthropy as early as late 20s. I worked with the United Way. I worked with Children's Aid. I worked with Delcrest. So I was kind of mindful of it.
Yeah.
But corporately, it wasn't a big thing.
Yeah.
At Maple Leaf Sports, we decided it was one of our values, be leaders in the community.
Okay.
And that was a conscious thing that we did. And then when I was writing my first book, I was reading tons of books, and Roger Martin, the former dean of the Rotman School of Management, all-star guy, good guy, bit of a friend. I read his book, Fixing the Game. And it was all about Wall Street model to help the NFL. And I said to Roger, yeah, I don't get that part at all. But there's something in that book that's a real good takeaway for me. And what it was organizations and individuals have three choices when it comes to the community. They can do nothing. So imagine your house. You buy a house, you don't cut the lawn, the roof starts to cave in. It hasn't been painted in years. You can do nothing. You can take bricks. He uses bricks as a metaphor in his little section. You can take bricks away. You do that by being racist, unsafe, pollute. There's lots of ways for an organization and a leader to take bricks away from the civil foundation. Or you can add bricks to the civil foundation. And that really resonated with me. It's in both my books, and I'm constantly talking it up. And today, largely what I do is add bricks. You know, I've got my wife and I have our own foundation. I'm very generous at the University of Windsor. I spend a lot of time there, give them a lot of money.
You're an environmentalist now?
Yeah,
I mean,
you know, I
been,
did that. I took
the
Al Gore course on climate reality. If you follow me on Twitter, I've already done 2 tweets on climate change this morning because it's the biggest threat facing mankind today. It simply is. You know, people compare it to World War II. I think it's right up there with nuclear war. It's happening it's happening slowly, but not as slowly as people think. So I'm doing all that stuff, and I just really feel that where I'm in my career now, I'm in a position financially and with a bit of a voice and enthusiasm and energy that I can continue to give back, and I think that's really important. So I really talk to young people about that, encourage them to do it. So I do an annual leadership symposium at the University of Windsor. We're doing our 8th this year, and I bring 6 executives in, 3 women, 3 men. And this year I thought, we need a non-for-profit. So I'm bringing in the executive director of Southern Ontario, Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah,
awesome.
And great
Fiona's I said, Fiona, and I phoned her up cold. I said, this is what we're doing, Fiona. Now, we get 500 people to go to this. I have no trouble getting great speakers now because the place is packed. And, Berkey has spoke there. I've had all the presidents of the automotive companies speak there, just all great speakers. But, I asked her cold, and I said, you know what else I do? I'd like you to say that if students sign up, they can be part of a build. And, I've done 2 Habitat for Humanity builds, and it's powerful stuff. I'm still in contact with the woman that we at Maple Leaf Sports, we built a house for her and 3 boys. And those boys are like 20 years old going to university now.
Wow, it's beautiful.
So it's pretty cool. So add bricks to the civil foundation.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say. Like, it's just like there's so much wisdom that you were able to download today, and it was just like it was so great. So much information about leadership and about how young leaders can really shine in their career, vision, values, all this stuff. I just really appreciate your time more than anything.
Well, one thing I'll leave with you, it's Thomas Maxwell said, leadership doesn't happen in a day; it takes a lifetime.
Yeah.
And the thing that I constantly reinforce with young people is leadership just doesn't happen. Great leadership.
Yeah.
You come out of school, you got a good degree, you graduate from one of the best schools, you join, and after a year or 2, you're promoted, and maybe a year or 2 later, you're promoted. It doesn't necessarily mean you're getting to be a great leader. In fact, I believe that 50% of CEOs are just horrible leaders. I really do. They might be making a lot more money than your dad and I made, a lot more money today. But doesn't mean they're great leaders. And so I believe that to be a great leader, you cannot be passive. You have to invest in it. You have to read. You have to network. You have to look for best practices. You have to constantly evolve. Status quo is not an option for a great leader, as it isn't in anything.
And build a honey empire.
Exactly. And leaders create other leaders too. Like I love what you say about the long game. Leaders really do cultivate more leaders.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, one of our values at Pillsbury was people make the difference.
Yeah.
It was one of our values at Skydome, and at Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment was we inspire our people. That was our one of our 4 values.
Love
so
it.
Very critical. So you're right. Leaders have that job to do it as well.
Totally.
Wow, this was great, Richard. We can't thank you enough. Where can people follow you on Twitter? What's your handle? He's got a good social media game.
Peddie.
At Richard Peddie. We'll put that on the screen too, Rob, right?
Yeah,
to
we'll
follow
that,
Richard there.
Bottom corner.
Is there going to be another book in Richard Peddie's career? Because you said you weren't going to write a second one.
Yeah.
And it was a great book. Get this one and this one. They're both awesome. Is there a third, and what would it be?
Well, I was toying with running for mayor. In fact, the CTV interview where I said that I wasn't going to run was filmed right over there. And then when I thought about it, I was going to write a third book. It was going to be 21 leadership lessons for running an urban center because I've done so much reading and so much travel and networking so much. But then I decided not to run for mayor, and I'm sure glad I did not. So right now, you know, as you correctly pointed out, I said one and done. Yeah. And lo and behold, out came a second one. Yeah. Someone asked me just yesterday, was I going to write another book? And I said, no, I haven't got any more good ideas to put in a book. That's what I said to him. I turned to my wife after. I don't remember who asked me. And I turned to my wife afterwards and goes, yeah, that's true. There's nothing I could put in a book that,
no more material
that I haven't already said.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, but it's great. You know, the stuff that you've imported into these books already has been amazing. Like we said, we appreciate your time. Yeah, like this has been amazing.
Well, I hope Rob, the sound guy and camera guy, can filter out the pounding over here. And,
that's on Rob, man. Electricity,
well,
Rob,
we're evaluating
out.
talent, right?
Yeah.
Meritocracy. Thank you, Richard Peddie, for being on with us. It was a great honor.
Okay,
appreciate
thanks
your
for
time.
coming.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for tuning in the Studio PTBO podcast. We will see you soon.